I guess, Bill, I'd be curious to know what it would take to convince you that there is a God. This is something that Anthony Flew, the former atheist who recently became a deist, as I mentioned, he said he'd like to ask his atheist friends, what would it take? You see, he was an atheist for a long time because, for philosophical reasons, but he said he took his atheist position before the Big Bang cosmology came along and before they knew about molecular biology that they know now. He said when he saw those things, his atheism went to pieces and he had to rethink it all, and eventually he ended up believing there must be a God of some kind because of that. And he asked his fellow atheists, now you, what would it take to convince you that there's a God, if there is one?
About a million different things I can think of. Jesus appearing right here before us right now. You levitating off the ground. Me walking outside the church, looking in the sky and seeing the stars arranged in a way that says, hey Ramsey, I exist. Any of those sorts of things where there's clear-cut evidence of something that I can't explain from an atheistic, naturalistic perspective would be, for me, compelling evidence. And so, actually, this is leading to the question I'm going to get to you in a minute. But let me just say, sort of in fairness, I don't find a lot of the arguments and a lot of the different pieces of evidence very compelling. But there is actually one argument for the existence of God that I actually do think is really interesting. And it's related to one you brought up. It's called the fine-tuning argument. And so, if you're interested in intelligent design arguments, I think this is actually a more interesting sort of argument. It has to do with the fact that if you look at the basic parameters of physics, it looks like they had to be just perfectly tuned a certain way, like the gravitational constant, the strong and weak force. And if they were slightly different, matter would not coalesce in a way that would allow for intelligent life to come about. Now, those are sort of controversial claims. Physicists dispute them, but it looks like that's a pretty good argument. And I find that actually quite interesting. I find that quite compelling. Unlike a lot of the other arguments, it strikes me, especially the other intelligent design arguments, that one actually strikes me as an interesting, compelling argument. I don't think it ultimately works. I think it has problems. But I think an atheist has to think about it to see what's wrong with that particular argument. But at least in terms of observational evidence or a particular event, I can think of a ton of different things that could happen that would cause me to become a theist. And as a matter of fact, that leads right into my question to you, which is, why does God make your life so difficult? In the sense that, why does God make it so difficult for you to actually be able to convince someone like me that he exists? Why does he stay hidden? Right? Why not bestow upon you supernatural powers such that you can call a press conference and have Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and me and all the media there, and then perform something, get all the scientists there, perform something that is inexplicable from a naturalistic perspective. Now, when I ask theists quite often, it's suggested to me that, well, that's really tacky, that God wouldn't sort of stoop to doing that. But you're familiar with the story of Elijah, right? Where Elijah said something like this. He said, well, let's figure out who's got it right. There are the prophets of Baal, and there's me. I'm a prophet of Jehovah. And I'll tell you what, let's put out there an altar, and whoever can cause the altar to burst into flames is told the truth. Well, that's very much like an empirical test. That's very much like a scientific test. And so, apparently in that situation, God felt that it was perfectly acceptable to accommodate Elijah in that situation to convince people that he was in fact the true God. Well, why doesn't he do that for you? Basically, why do you think God stays silent on this issue?
I think there's several parts to that answer. One of which is, on the one hand, that kind of display of force would seem to overwhelm people's resistance to faith. And, one might think that people would have no choice but to believe if such a thing was done. And that's probably true for some people. Some people probably would. But on the other hand, on the other extreme, it wouldn't do any good for others. Because seeing is not necessarily believing. If I did any kind of a magic trick, magicians do it here in casinos all the time. things that I think, that must be real magic. But I know it's not, because I can't figure out how he did it. But someone would say that can be figured out. And that's right. No matter how stupendous something appears, the skeptic can always deny it. C.S. Lewis said that he only knew one woman, only met one woman, who ever claimed to have seen a ghost. And he said the interesting thing is that she didn't believe in ghosts before she saw it. And she didn't believe in ghosts after she saw it. She thought it was a hallucination. Proving one thing, that seeing is not believing. You believe what you are willing to believe, and you do not believe what you're not willing to believe. For example, you believe in things I can't possibly believe in. You believe that this first self-replicating molecule, made up of many complex parts containing lots of genetic information, very complex information, put itself together without a designer. To me, that's a miracle. There's certainly nothing in nature to suggest that such thing could ever happen. And so we believe our own amazing things, depending on what we're willing to believe. I'm open-minded enough to believe that miracles can happen, but I don't believe that God is obligated to do miracles at our command. In Christianity, unlike some forms of television Christianity, in real Christianity, God does miracles when he wants to, and that's pretty darn seldom. Even in the Bible, very seldom are miracles done. There's a lot of them, but they're clustered on 3 different epochs over a period of 4,000 years. They're not all the time. They're very rare. And likewise, they're very rare now, it would appear. I realize that television Christianity makes us command God to do miracles, and he has to heal us, he has to do things. That's not real Christianity, and isn't God's law. I have a question too, huh? Wow, I wrote down a question for you, but now I'm having a hard time finding it here. Too bad. One thing I wondered about is that, did your move toward atheism, in any way was it affected by negative experiences that you had with religious people? Or, if not initially, has it been more strengthened, your faith of atheism, confirmed by the behavior of religious people?
I would say initially no, but I certainly agree that the level of hypocrisy and the sort of different sort of historical understanding of different sorts of atrocities that have been committed in the name of religion didn't exactly make it seem more appealing to me. That's certainly true. Now, I mean, this is actually something that's getting discussed a lot these days. Historically, there certainly have been a number of horrendous things that have been committed in the name of religion, and I think Steve would agree that, yes, but that doesn't demonstrate that religion is false. That just means that some people abuse religion, and I think to some degree you can say the same thing about atheists, people like Stalin and things like that. But it does seem to me that there is the following difference. If you have a religious document or you have a religious text that basically says that people who don't accept this religion are bad people, they're very bad people, then it's a fairly short step from that belief to they need to be destroyed or they need to be eliminated. And I don't see that going the other way with regard to atheism. There's nothing about it, well, there really isn't any kind of straightforward atheistic document or doctrine or anything like that. But there's nothing in atheism that suggests that people who believe in God are really bad, evil people and they need to be destroyed, they need to be eliminated. So at least in terms of the link between belief systems and the potential abuse and for violence and things like that, I think that there's a much stronger link between theism on the one hand and that violence than going the other way. I do believe that's the case. But no, initially it was not through bad experiences. And in fact, some of my best friends and some of the best people I know are deeply religious individuals. Some of my best friends in Notre Dame were priests. So I certainly recognize that it actually goes both ways.
Last question for Steve.
Okay, I just kind of want to ask the same kind of question you asked me. Again, it's kind of a two-parter, but is there any particular observation or anything that we could discover that would cause you to abandon your faith, that would cause you to become an atheist? And the second part is, with regard to the arguments against theism, I realize that you find none of them convincing, but I'm curious, just out of curiosity, which one keeps you awake at night? Which one do you worry about